Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're very happy to have Bishop William Weigand with us today from the Sacramento Diocese of the Catholic Church. He is an important person in our community, and he will be honored in May at our Power of One event. We recognize his goodness and grace and those things that he brings to the community. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Tell us where you were born and raised and something about boyhood.
Well, I was born in Bend, Oregon, Central Oregon, but raised in the Spokane, Washington area. My father was the manager of a JCPenney store in small towns around Spokane. I ended up on the Idaho side, St. Mary's, Idaho, from where I went to the seminary and became a priest of Idaho. But childhood was mainly, grade school was in Tico, Washington, about 40 miles south of Spokane, and a farming community close to the Idaho border, close to lakes and mountains. So I grew up camping a bit, fishing, boating, swimming, a little bit of hunting, but not much.
But the things of boyhood.
The things of boyhood.
Were you raised in a religious home?
Yes. Yes, my family was always Catholic. My mother actually became Catholic when she married my father. I would say an ordinary religious home, not excessive in any way. We were quite an ordinary family, I think.
But you went to church and you were taught to pray and
yes.
all of those
yes.
things.
Yes,
How old were you when you thought you would consider the seminary?
I was actually probably in the 7th grade, 6th, 7th grade. And I left home to go to a boarding school for high school that was already a preparation for the seminary. And that was in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, Mount Angel, about 50 miles south of Portland.
That's beautiful country.
Yes, it is.
And the Tri-Cities area of eastern Washington has always been very unique unto itself, and the things that happen there, to my way of understanding that.
Yes.
Now, one of the things I've been really wanting to ask you about is I lived in Salt Lake as a young adult, young husband and father when you were serving there, and the beauty of the Cathedral of the Madeleine, or Madeleine, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, and the reverence that you were held in by the Mormon people who thought you were a perfect fit for the Catholics to be plunked down in the middle of Salt Lake City. Was that a good experience for you, or was that hard?
It was both. It was certainly a very good experience, but I went to Salt Lake as the Catholic bishop from a small parish in southwestern Idaho, Homedale, just 4 miles from the Oregon border. And it was a very comfortable fit, especially after having, by that time I had returned from South America, where I spent 10 years as a young priest in missionary service. What was hard about Salt Lake City was just the responsibilities of the office, and that diocese covers the whole state of Utah, and the Catholic population, while centered in the Wasatch, Salt Lake, Ogden particularly, required travel over the whole state, which is a beautiful state, but it was challenging in terms of the distances, the scattered Catholic communities. Working with the Mormons, particularly in Salt Lake City, with the officials of the church was a joy because of their religious values and how important they consider them for the civic community. So it was just wonderful working with in a community that valued traditional values and the importance of good living and of the importance of family, the sacredness of human life, and the importance of maintaining values, passing them from one generation to the other. And in the, at least at that time, the 13 plus years that I was in Salt Lake City, the values for the most part were honored in the general community, not just among the Mormons. We also had a good relationship with other Protestant, other Christian groups, and it seems to me the relationships there were closer than any place else where I've lived, including here in California.
I went to junior high and high school up in Heber City, east of Salt Lake. And I dated a girl who went to church at a different building that I went to, and it was an older one. It had one of the early ones built. And along about our sophomore, junior year, the LDS church decided to build a new one, and they put that old one up for sale, and the Catholic church bought it. And they remodeled it, and they fixed it to the way they wanted. One of my good boyfriends was Catholic, and he'd been going over to Park City to go to church. So now the Catholic church had, their own meeting house right off of Main Street in Heber City. And Tony would say, I'll go to church with you if you'll come to church with me. So I did. And I loved Mass and other things that unfolded, and we had a wonderful time. And that was a very early taste for me of particularly the Mormons and the Catholics, and I liked the taste of it very well.
And that particular ward, that building, I remember it very well. It served us, and as far as I know, is still serving the Catholic community. And from there was an outreach. I don't remember just why, but kind of an outreach to the poor. That and in these days there are Hispanics in that area, yes, serving Park City, I think.
Yes.
The tourist community, but many live in Heber City, and even in my day there was a kind of a community effort to look out for those who were less well off, So the former ward house that became the Catholic Church, St. Lawrence Mission, yes, served for worship and prayer, but also as community outreach.
Well, it was a nice addition to the community, and everybody thought that. Now, were you surprised when you got word you were coming to Sacramento? I mean, did you know you'd be leaving Salt Lake going somewhere soon? Or did you think you'd be there another 10 years? Or?
Basically, I did not know. And in general, a Catholic bishop stays put. That's the general trend. But there were rumors flying around our circles. And I was told later there were rumors in Sacramento that I was being considered. I have no idea how those things get started. So only in that sense that there had been rumors that when I got the word, it clicked. I was not anxious, however, I have to say, to leave Salt Lake City. I had been there almost 13 and a half years. It had become very comfortable. I had some good relationships with the Mormon community and with people in general. So the idea of starting out from scratch didn't fill me with a lot of joy. But once I got here, I loved it, and the transition was quite easy, actually.
Well, we were already living here when you came here, and my family, me and my house, we were thrilled you were coming here because we knew what your reputation was in Utah. Now, let's talk a little bit more about your parents and brothers and your brother. You still have brothers who are living?
All three of my brothers are still alive. The oldest is turning 80 this summer.
Are they in good health and plugging along?
Relatively. I'm the third of the four, so I have one younger brother who lives in Arizona with his family. They've all had some health issues, bypass surgery, that sort of thing. But I was probably, because of the liver disease and ultimately liver transplant, of the four, I was probably had the greatest health issues.
And that was quite a remarkable story, quite a miracle in the community. That was everybody watched that closely, and you must have had 500,000 prayers flying to heaven in your behalf, as well as the man who donated.
I'm quite sure, because I had messages of one kind or another from all kinds of people and from leaders in the different churches, including the Mormon church, that they were praying for me. The liver disease took almost 25 years developing until it got very critical. But when it got critical, the word got out, and I think I looked pretty awful. So,
well, you looked like you were sick.
so people had been watching and following for some time. Dan Haverty, one of several who came forward to donate a major portion of his liver, was the one chosen. And just a few days ago, on April 1st, I had lunch with Dan and his wife. So that was 7 years since the surgery. And he's doing fine. He's just a marvelous person and a marvelous couple. The whole family was involved in assenting to that decision on Dan's part, including his mother.
Really?
Who was 83 at the time, and she's still alive 7 years later. So it was kind of a family decision. It was very unusual, and it swept me off my feet, actually, the faith and the goodness, the selflessness of that family.
And none of us would be thinking about, I wonder what his mother's thinking. That's a nice piece of the story.
Yes.
Very, very good. How is the Catholic Church doing in Greater Sacramento?
Well, I think very well. There are always challenges, but and California is constantly changing. It's been our whole history. So the challenge to adapt goes on. It's never finished. During my years, we had to adapt to a much larger Hispanic population, for example, that grew rapidly and in our city in general, and also to quite a large influx of Filipinos from the Bay Area to our area, largely because of housing costs and things like that. So just as an example, we had to promote some candidates for priesthood from among the Filipino population, because we had no Filipino priests. And they speak English and everything, but all groups like to have a fuller identity with their pastors.
Of course.
So that was a very successful, not just a challenge, but a successful effort to raise up many young priests from among the Filipinos. We had less success on the Hispanic level, but we made great progress. Bishop Soto, my successor, is continuing those kinds of efforts. The multi-ethnic mix changes a bit. He's working very hard on Catholic schools to keep them open and strong. With the economy the way it's been in the past few years, it's been very difficult for families to pay a tuition, for example. And there's always a challenge of here now and then starting new parishes or building a larger church, the infrastructure. And of course, we went through, on my watch, quite a scandal, a major scandal, because of the sexual abuse of minors on the part of some clergymen. Relatively small percentage, and most of it years and years ago, 20, 30, even 40 years ago.
Are we kind of getting past that now?
Yes, very much. But
Yeah.
that caused establishing whole new systems of much more complete studies and investigations of candidates, even of volunteers in ministry. I mean, everybody gets investigated if they're going to work with children, and fingerprinted and that sort of thing. We have programs now for adults, for parents, teaching them about child safety, what to look for, and how to report. And so I think much of that at least, was established on my watch, but it's always changing also. So the safeguards we have in place are just quite complete compared with prior to the year 2000, for example.
And so will they change again, 25 years from now? Will we be
Well,
saying?
they're constantly updated. Our national guidelines on that were reviewed and slightly modified just a couple of years ago. I think every 5 years they're looked at very seriously. And one of the things, for example, that I developed is a code of conduct for all church workers.
That's good.
And making it very clear what are the do's and what are the don'ts, and training in boundary issues, and how where is the line that if you cross you're out of line. Those things have to be looked at periodically and changed, but does no good to have those kinds of safeguards if they're not implemented. So there's constant alertness about complete implementation of those guidelines. But I think it's going fine.
It appears, from my angle, that the Catholic Church is the long pole in the tent of what is Northern California and, of course, Sacramento. We have a friend, Marie Adams, who teaches at St. Mary's, and she teaches 8th grade, and she loves what she does, and she loves the students, and she feels like she's in a wonderful environment, and that she's not only teaching the ABCs, but also of Jesus and all of those other things. One of the other things I wanted to mention, I'm going to presume if you spent 10 years in Colombia, you speak Spanish.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And do you still use your Spanish routinely?
I do. That was one of the reasons probably I was chosen for Sacramento, by the way, because I did know Spanish. It was a huge need at the time. But many of our communities here in the metro area, but up and down the valley, in the metro area, many of the people are very bilingual, but for prayer and worship, they still prefer their native language. It's just where they're more authentic in themselves. Up the valley, we have many more people who are the adults. The children speak English, but the adults don't necessarily. So anytime I fill in for Bishop Soto in some event, very often it may be in Spanish, but very often it'll be at least bilingual. Currently, I'm helping with the sacrament of confirmation in different parishes, which builds on baptism. And I would say about half of our parishes require some Spanish in those kinds of services, mainly English. Some of them require full Spanish.
I went to Mass last week when the oils were consecrated.
Yes.
And that had a fair amount of Spanish in it.
Yeah.
And as I looked around, and the cathedral was pretty full that night, but as I looked around, I could see that there appeared to be those who would be Spanish speakers, and that was an enjoyable night. I liked that a lot.
Well, and coming up in a couple of days on Good Friday, for example, which is an important day for Catholics, but but for Hispanics, they'll come out. So we, in midday, there's a service in English, which Bishop Soto will have, but I will have the evening service completely in Spanish because they come out for that. That's a very special day.
And then Saturday night there is an Easter Mass, is there not?
Yes, and that will be mostly English, but kind of bilingual.
That's wonderful.
So.
That's wonderful. That I think sometimes if I were somewhere, my wife and I spent a month in the south of South America earlier this year when it was summer down there, and if you just go up to McDonald's, you have to point. If you don't speak Spanish, you have to point at the meal that you want. And I knew naranja was orange and a few words like that, but you still had to point at the size you wanted and all of those other things. So if I were going to go to church in a country like that and I had to sit there and couldn't understand much of what they were saying to me, I would appreciate when someone would come in and talk to me and teach me in my native language. I want to go back to the days of when the pictures we saw where you were fishing. What's the magic of fishing? What's the delight of that? I've never been much of a fisherman.
For me, the delight has always been just getting out in the beauty of God's created universe, the nature. So it's typically in the mountains or on a beautiful lake, a beautiful river. So just getting back to nature in a sense. Often my fishing accompanied a camping experience at a campground or a lake cabin. So the real joy for me was just the peace, the quiet, the beauty. Fishing was something to do while there. So
but
in that sense,
didn't matter if you caught anything or not.
That was kind of it. And although it is fun to catch a fish, more fun than not to. But it was for me. I was not and am not a kind of an avid fisherman in the sense that I'm driven to it. If anything, it's the mountains, it's the beauty, it's the lake that draws my attention.
Are there good places to fish around Northern California?
There are, but frankly, it's age related perhaps.
I understand the concept.
I don't do a whole lot of fishing at this stage of my life. And when I do, it's kind of comfortable fishing. So a nephew of mine who's a dentist in Spokane, each summer lends me his lake cabin at a lake in northern Idaho. The northernmost large lake of Idaho, Priest Lake, it's called.
That's good.
And the cabin, again, it's a beautiful place to be, but it's comfortable. It's got all the conveniences, plus a boat, a fishing boat, and so you don't have to work at it a whole lot. That I do every summer for a week.
And if you're a fisherman of men, does that become comfortable to your spirit and your heart too?
Absolutely, and that may be another kind of a deeper reason that drew me to fishing. There is a kind of a similarity, and I would have to say behind that phrase we would see a missionary thrust to reach out to people who don't know the Lord or who are searching for something deeper in their lives. And I suppose that instinct is what led me to, as a young priest, 5 years ordained, to tell Bishop Sylvester Trinan, the Bishop of Idaho, that I'd be willing to go to the Idaho's mission in Cali, Colombia, if and when they needed another recruit. He took me up on that, And I did go, and I spent almost 10 years. It was a great experience.
We were in Columbia a year or two ago. I've forgotten the city already, but when you come into the harbor, they've got the Virgin Mary holding the baby Jesus sticking up right out in the middle of the harbor. I'm sorry, I can't think.
Cartagena?
Yes, Cartagena.
Yes,
And that was impressive and fun, and I just went, oh, that is way cool.
Yeah.
Now, if you could wave a magic wand in your life to fix something or repair something or restore something, what would that be?
You know, I would love to fix what we call the Holy Land, Jerusalem, State of Israel with the Palestinians. You've got the mix of religious, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, different politics. It's extremely complex. I've been there a number of times. I would like to fix that. It needs fixing. For their sakes and for the good of the world.
Nice answer. And thank you again for joining us. It's a pleasure to visit with you.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Okay, take care.